This is a makeup date. You know, it's like we had a rain out. We had a snow out, actually, but in baseball terms, it would be a rain out. So this was originally going to be a sermon that would be part of the whole Gray Matters initiative and looking at aspects of work and faith. And now it's the second Sunday of Easter, and I'm still going to preach about work and faith. And so if there are any liturgical police in the congregation this morning, forgive me, because we are not going to do Easter. We're going to look at this work and faith theme. And so we're going to look at, this is easy to find in the Bible. We're going to start at Genesis 2. And I would like to read all of Genesis 2 and all of Genesis 3, but we don't have time to do all of that this morning. So I'm going to read a few selected verses from these two chapters. So we're going to read starting at verse 7. And, you know, you've heard this before. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Out of the ground the Lord God made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then we're going to jump forward to verse 15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to till it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You may freely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall die." And then we're going to skip ahead because you actually know what happened. But we're going to skip ahead to chapter 3, verse 17, and this is God's curse. To the man he said, "Because you listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree about which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. You are dust, and to dust you shall return." This is the word of the Lord. My father died last summer in August, and it's impossible to capture the magnitude of feelings that I had after losing my father. My dad lived to be 91. He was a combination of many really good and some not so good elements, just like the rest of us. And most importantly, when he died, he knew that I loved him, and I knew that he loved me. And both of our children participated in the funeral. You all know Jesse. Jesse did one of the eulogies. And many of you know our daughter Amanda, Jesse's sister, who is about to graduate from seminary in New York City next month. And she was the liturgist, and I was the preacher. And Amanda told a story about her grandfather with a lot of affection, a story I don't think I had heard before that, and a story that shed some light on today's topic of work and faith. When she was 25, she earned a master's degree from Georgetown University, and a short while later, she went to see her grandparents, and my dad said, "How old are you?" She said, 25. And he said in a defeated voice, "Only 40 more years to work." Those were not the encouraging words that she wanted to hear with her newly minted degree. And then he said, "Well, life's a you know what, and then you die." And Amanda's point in telling that story, beyond illustrating my father's contrarian nature, was to say that it's possible to have different values and yet still deeply love the members of your family. But what struck me as I thought about it was that it perfectly captured my dad's negative view of work. Like many people, my father lived a compartmentalized life. There was work on one side, and there was the rest of his life on the other. Work was what he did to be able to afford the life that he wanted. In my dad's view, he got very lucky when General Motors, the company that he worked for, offered him incentives to take an early retirement in his mid-50s. And he lived another 36 years after retiring. And he really had no special projects in retirement other than being happy that he didn't have to get up and go to work, while he did his crossword puzzles and read and kept track of where he ate and spent time with his family. And we were the beneficiaries of a lot of love in the form of generosity. We have wonderful memories together of long weekends on Mackinac Island every summer for the past 40 years, as well as holiday and birthday parties. And there's a lot of good there. But I think my father missed something by compartmentalizing his life. Work for him was a necessary evil instead of a seamless expression of who he was and what he valued. And he's not alone in that. Maybe the ultimate work-life compartmentalization is shown in the Apple TV show Severance. And I'm guessing a few of you are familiar with that show. It's pretty grim, set in the not too distant dystopian future where people can choose to have a severance procedure done that separates their knowledge of life at home from life at work. When they come to work, they pass through some sort of boundary that temporarily erases their knowledge of life outside of work. And when they leave to return home, the reverse happens and they forget everything about work. And on the surface, this is done for security purposes. You can't leak any corporate secrets away from the office if you have no memory of what goes on at the office. But as the show goes on, as you might guess, there are more sinister forces at work, and it's all kind of creepy and dark and shadowy. But one of the main characters has chosen the severance procedure because of the untimely loss of his wife. The severance procedure guarantees for 8 hours a day, the pain of his grief is erased. And it's an extreme example, but many of us throw ourselves into work to avoid the pain in other parts of our lives. Severance is a big hit, and I believe pop culture can be a mirror that we can see ourselves in, and the show raises lots of questions. It's the ultimate in compartmentalization, and as you watch it, you root for the characters to wake up and become unsevered and integrate their lives. We intuitively feel life is not supposed to be compartmentalized like that. So where would we get such an idea? Well, we go back to the beginning, to Genesis. And as we read, God created Adam, it's actually the Hebrew word for man, and breathed life into him, put the man in a garden, and told him to go to work, tilling and keeping the garden. Work is part of the deal from the beginning. Adam was created to work. You and I, the descendants of Adam, are created to work. And for the sake of time, I skipped over lots of verses in Genesis 2 and 3 when I read this, and I skipped over verses 10 to 14 in chapter 2 about 4 rivers and gold and bdellium and onyx stone. And those verses initially look sort of like throwaway verses. They seem pretty obscure. But what if they aren't? What if from the beginning God is saying, I'm giving you resources of water and minerals and metal, along with soil and wind and sun, to do something with? God expects us to do what he did, to create. God created humans to be creators and gave us resources to work with. It's up to us to do something with those resources. Adam is placed in the garden, and in verse 15, he is told to till it. And other translations say work it or cultivate it. In the King James Version, with its stately language, says to dress it, like a vine dresser. Well, here's a fascinating thing. This Hebrew word, translated work or till or dress, is translated as service when it's used in other spots in the Old Testament. From the beginning, humanity's relationship to the earth is intended to be service, not domination or exploitation. The earth is put into our care. So caring for creation is a vital part of the meaning of work. And here's something else that's equally fascinating. The same Hebrew word that means both work and service is also translated more than 50 other times in the Old Testament as worship. Work, service, and worship are intimately connected in creation. Just as it is less than what God intended when we compartmentalize our work from the rest of our life, so also it is less than what God intended for worship to be compartmentalized from the rest of our life, or from work. Our worship and work were designed to be coherent. There should not be a divide between who you are on Sunday morning in this space and who you are the rest of the week. That's why I chose the word seamlessness in the title of the sermon. We are made for seamlessness, created for a coherent life of work, service, and worship. And so if you start thinking about that, immediately you see that not all work leads itself to seamlessness. It's a complicated topic, and it's worthy of us thinking about and actually having discussion about. But some easy examples stand out. For example, if your work is calling senior citizens on the phone, and when they answer it saying, "Grandpa, this is your oldest grandson. I'm in jail someplace, and I need you to send money." If your job is to scam money off of senior citizens, or maybe your job, your work is producing pornographic images of children, those are easy to identify as destructive work that does not contribute to human flourishing. But what about other jobs? The deeper we dig, the more complicated it gets. What if your work is sitting in a bunker in Arizona and guiding drones that kill people in the Middle East, and you go home often not sure if you killed a bad guy or an innocent person? What if your work contributes disproportionately to climate change? Or what about this? What if your work is creating advertising for the masses designed to encourage spending by subliminal messages that equate reckless consumption with joy and human flourishing? I don't know. I'm not trying to make judgments. All I'm saying is it gets complicated in a hurry, and I wish we had more time to really dive into that. But it's worth thinking about. And all of us should be asking how our work lends itself to a seamless life. But you may also be saying to yourself, well, what I do is actually good. I'm a teacher. I can see how doing that contributes to the common good. But there are plenty of moments when my work doesn't feel seamless at all. What's up with that? And the truth is, often work is a source of conflict and frustration. The problem with most jobs is there are other people involved. People who rub us the wrong way. People who don't work hard. People with cynical attitudes, incompetent bosses, or irresponsible subordinates. And if we widen the lens of work to include all the work we do that doesn't earn a paycheck, doing the laundry, mowing the lawn, raising children, cleaning the bathroom, cooking Tuesday dinner. A lot of that can be monotonous, and it feels like drudgery instead of anything worshipful. So I used the word entropy in my sermon title to describe this. Entropy is the inevitability that things fall apart. I used that word because I wasn't sure if you still posted the sermon title on the corner of College and Fulton. The actual word for this is sin. But that word is so freighted with baggage and misunderstanding, I thought it was safer to use the word entropy. And I also was thinking somebody's going to be driving down Fulton Avenue and they're going to see out of the corner of their eye this week, this Sunday at Central Reformed Church, seamless sin. And that didn't seem right to me either. So I went with entropy. But look at the verses I read from Genesis 3, what God has to say to Adam after the fall. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. You shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Really, there's not much difference between this and what my dad said to Amanda. Life's a you-know-what, and then you die. Or what the book of Ecclesiastes says. What do mortals get from all the toil and strain with which they toil under the sun? For all their days are full of pain, and their work is a vexation. Even at night their minds do not rest. This also is a vanity. If we're honest, that is familiar. So there's a very important distinction to make here. Work is not the curse. Work was given before the fall as a blessing. After the fall, when sin has entered the world, work is cursed. What was once pure blessing is now, like everything else, a mixed bag. We all have experienced that. We are aware of all sorts of inequities and injustices associated with work. Historically, men have been paid more when they do the same work as women. Historically, people of color have been passed over for promotions. Child labor, which many of us assumed was a relic of the past, is now an epidemic across the United States. Work can hurt or even kill people. Coal miners get black lung disease. Industrial accidents happen. I saw someone lose a thumb at my summer job in college. And I have a friend whose husband died in an accident at work. The list goes on. Good people get fired. Work becomes mindless repetition. People can't make a living doing what they love, so they compromise. Do something they don't love in order to pay the bills. Surveys say as many as 70% of Americans are not engaged or actively disengaged with their work. And in the last few years, the hours at home during the pandemic gave rise to what's become known as the Great Resignation, where many, many people decided life's too short to keep doing this and left their jobs. Genesis 3 should open our eyes and lead us to expect work to be a mixed bag. It should open our eyes to see that work will never provide ultimate meaning and identity. That's God's domain. The curse should drive us towards God because work will never fully satisfy. And on top of that, the mixed bag of work becomes an opportunity then to give witness to our faith. Not through our words, but our actions. We can be honest and have integrity when others cut corners and stretch the truth. We can be joyful when others around us are jaded and full of cynicism. So I was originally supposed to give this sermon in November on Christ the King Sunday. And I thought of an illustration that tied into that. And now I'm all liturgically confused, but I'm going to go ahead and use this illustration that really fits for Christ the King Sunday. Because I just want to tell this story, and I didn't want to rewrite my sermon also, That would be work, right? So does anyone remember the Disney animated movie Robin Hood from the 1970s. Robin Hood and Little John walking through a forest, laughing back and forth about the other has to say. Huh? Anyone? Anyone? Bill Mills? You're smiling. You remember that? Yeah, good. So it was this strange country music Shakespearean actor mashup with voices like the distinguished British actor Peter Ustinov, the great British comic actor Terry Thomas, along with Roger Miller, the king of the road, who sang the songs, and Goober from Mayberry and Festus from Gunsmoke, and Mr. Haney from Green Acres all did voices. And so we had it on VHS, and when Jesse was 3, he was a Robin Hood nut, except he called it Robert Hood. He'd come walking up with that tape in his hand, and he'd say, "Me, watch Robert Hood?" And this went on for a very long time, about 739 days in a row of playing that in our house. And I suddenly, sometime, I don't know, maybe in the 500th or 600th viewing, I suddenly saw this was a story rich with theological significance. There was a good king named King Richard, but he was away. Now, you have to overlook the fact that he was off fighting the Crusades. That's a different story that we're not going to go into. You need to overlook that. But while he was away, his evil brother, Prince John, was in charge, along with Prince John's enforcer, the wicked sheriff of Nottingham. So Robin Hood and his merry men, including Friar Tuck, revolted against the oppression of Prince John by taking back money that had been illegally taken from average folks. They were into wealth distribution long before that became a thing. But it's a misnomer when we say they robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. They didn't take anything that had been fairly earned. They took back what had been illegally seized. In short, although evil Prince John was the ruler, they continued to live under the reign of King Richard. And that is a parable for the Christian life. We recognize the reign and rule of a good king who is not physically present. And with joy, like the merry men, we do acts of justice that are signs of the reign and rule of God, not the Prince of Darkness. So how do we reverse the curse that God has put on work following the fall? We actually can't fully reverse the curse. That's Jesus's territory. But what we can do is recognize that we live in this in-between time when the reign of God is an already not yet reality. Robin Hood lived under the reign of King Richard while Prince John was in power. We live under the reign of God while the Prince of Darkness has power. The idea is echoed by the prophet Jeremiah in the passage that Brooke read, where Jeremiah tells the exiled Hebrews living in Babylon to build houses and live in them, to plant gardens and eat what they produce, to seek the welfare of the city where they are in exile, pray to the Lord on its behalf. Jeremiah tells them that it's in its welfare they will find their welfare. And that was a surprising message. Jeremiah didn't have an easy time of things. He delivered the word of the Lord, and it made him unpopular. He was beaten and arrested. He was put into stocks. He was thrown into a cistern. And then the worst happened after all of that. What he'd been warning about happened. Jerusalem fell. The best and the brightest were taken into exile in Babylon. This is one of the major traumatic events in the history of Israel. And after all of that, he addressed the question, how do we live now? By saying, build houses, plant gardens, seek the welfare of the city where you live, go to work, do your job, do it well. That's what we're supposed to do. So how do you do that? Well, go to the volunteer fair out there this morning. Sign up to help someplace. Live under the reign of God, even when those around you don't recognize the reign of God. Realize that the way you work is a sign of the reign and rule of God. I love this quote from the British novelist Dorothy Sayers, who was once asked to write an essay about faith and work. And she wrote, "The church's approach to an intelligent carpenter is usually confined to exhorting him not to be drunk and disorderly in his leisure hours and to come to church on Sundays. What the church should be telling him is this, that the very first demand his religion makes upon him is that he should make good tables." Sayers believed the best way to serve others with our work is to serve the work. The best way to love and serve others with our jobs is to be really good at our jobs. And as we've seen, worship, service, and work are intimately connected. How do we seek the welfare of the city where we live? By doing good work. Work isn't the curse. We're created to work, just as we're created for service and worship. The Apostle Paul sums up our approach to work in 1 Corinthians 10, whatever you do, do everything for the glory of God. And when the great composer Johann Sebastian Bach was satisfied with a piece of music he'd created, he'd write the letters S, D, G at the bottom of the page. Soli Deo Gloria, for the glory of God alone. May we also work for the glory of God alone. Let's pray. Lord, you have created us with the blessing of work, and yet we often find that that is difficult. Help us this day to see work as an opportunity to express that we live under your rule and reign. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen.